Blas?
Here.
Member Allen?
Here.
Chair Cook?
Here.
Let the record show that everyone is here and Member Tigert is absent.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, will somebody make a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Agenda is adopted. Approval of the minutes of the January, February, April, and May meetings. Did anybody note anything in there that needed correction or revision? Okay. Somebody like to make a motion to approve?
I move adoption of the January 12, February 9, April 12, and May 10, 2016 minutes.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And the minutes are approved. We will move on. Is there any public comment for items that are not on the agenda? Anybody? Okay. We will move on to the public hearings. Starting with 16815 for 6805 Yonge Street.
Great. Well, thank you, Board. Before you this evening is an application for design review for a new fence and arbor and landscaping at 6805 Yonge Street. This house is located in the Old Town Historic District, and it's located right there on Yonge Street where Yountville Crossroads meets them at the T. So the applicant proposes to do quite a few projects here, and if you look at the drawing up on the screen, we're going to kind of go on each of them one by one. So first, here on the driveway and the parking shoulder, the applicant is proposing to remove that paved portion and install a gravel driveway and a gravel shoulder. This is actually returning it to the standards for the Old Town Historic District, and this traditionally doesn't require any design review. Along the edges here, there's going to be stamped concrete, which is also consistent. This has been shared with our Deputy Public Works Director and engineer, and she's of the opinion that this is consistent. None of that traditionally does require design review. What does require design review is this portion here, this fence and arbor that they are proposing to install. They're proposing a 5-foot fence below an 8-foot tall arbor along the front property line. The fence is really split into two parts. This lower section is 2 feet of a traditional board-on-board fencing, and above that is 3 feet of traditional hog wire fencing. The fence is proposed to run about 27 feet long, just along there on the property line, existing from the walkway all the way until the neighbor's property. Above this proposed fence is about 3 feet of just open space, and then an arbor, just a traditional arbor that will be supported by 4 support beams. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, due to the property being located across the Yountville Crossroad, the applicant wishes to install this taller fence and arbor in order to maintain privacy and also mitigate any vehicle lights that will come into the house or any other any of the other consequences that come from being so closely placed to the crossroad. Now, first, what town staff did upon seeing this application is took a look at the design standards for the Old Town Historic District. As stated in section 1820 of the code, the Old Town Historic District homes are encouraged to have low picket fences at the front property lines. Now, it's important to note that the code says encouraged to have the picket fences, but there's plenty of other examples within the Old Town Historic District that even have that hog wire fence or that board-on-board fence. And staff is of the opinion that both of those styles are consistent with the Old Town Historic District. It doesn't have to be the white picket fence. That more rustic look we feel is appropriate for the neighborhood. The chief issue with the application that staff found was regarding the height of the fence along that front property line. The 2 feet of board-on-board fencing with 3 feet of hog wire fencing above. Staff, because Chapter 18, Section 16 of the code states the height of a wall, fence, or landscape screening along the front property line shall not exceed 3 feet, and the height of a wall or fence within the front yard or setback shall not exceed 3 feet. With that in mind, staff is of the opinion that a 3-foot board-on-board would be appropriate, or a 3-foot hog wire, or even a combination of the two, as long as the total is within that 3 feet, would be appropriate. But in order to have all of that as presented, the 5 feet, a variance would be required. I included in the staff report before you the findings that would need to be made in order to grant that variance. And while staff recognizes that the location of the house and the relationship of Yountville Crossroads, that cross street, staff still isn't of the opinion that the location causes circumstances that would allow the board to make these required findings. There are other properties in town that are located at the end of a street like this, and it does not directly affect the enjoyment or the uses or properties that are affected by this location. That being said, it is ultimately the board's decision, and the applicant is also here during the public hearing phase to make remarks. There's a condition of approval included to limit that to 3 feet, but it's for the board to discuss and decide, and staff is here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions of staff?
I don't know if these are for you or for the applicants. There are some posts up on the property now. Do you know the height of those posts?
Yeah, it looks like that's going to be about 8 feet.
There's some are between 8 and 9 feet. They need to be trimmed the reason why. No.
Yeah. But that's to show the arbor height that's going to be.
I'll tell you what, I think probably most of these are going to be for the applicants, so I'll just wait. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Karen? Barbara?
I guess one clarification. So with the hog wire on top of the board, then you have the trellis. The trellis is about 3 feet.
What you have
above
here.
the 5 feet, I guess.
Yeah, this arbor above, between the hog wire and the arbor, there's probably about 3 feet of open, just nothing.
Yeah, so is there, okay, I guess I'll ask the applicant, there's still going to be vine, is that going to be blocked, covered, or?
They'll be able to speak on that better than I will.
There's no, there's a fence height restriction of 3 feet, but there's no restriction for placing, to me, it's not really an arbor because it has no depth. It's just a board at a height.
Yeah,
There's no restrictions on that?
It'd be considered an architectural or an aesthetic feature.
Okay. But there are limitations in the code for not filling it in with living materials.
Typically, there is a definition there of the landscape screen, and landscape screens are traditionally shrubbery or a hedge that limit any visibility. And from this application, it doesn't look like that's going in. So.
But there is a restriction in the code that
Of a
that is not
landscape screen,
allowed.
yes.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
Sorry, I didn't pose my question very
No,
well.
you're good.
Okay, then we will move on to, do we have comments from the applicant? Would you like to step up?
We just ask that you introduce yourself.
I'm the owner, Laura Ulam, and this is Mario Saniola, who's doing the work for me.
No, the arbor is not arbor, is a trellis. So it's just an accent to the whole structure. One of the reasons why Laura liked the house was because of the windows. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the property. And the first thing I said was like, you know exactly what happens to the street. You know, Mr. Steele made a comment of saying, you know, there's a lot of people that live at the end of streets, but nobody lives at the end of Yountville crossings like us. You know, 60% or 70% of the traffic that goes through Yountville goes through that street. And you're all aware with harvest season, summer, you know, tour buses, bicycle races, foot races, which, you know, leaves me with a blower, picking up garbage, and most of the stuff gets thrown off the cars and get blown off by cars. That was the reason for the 2-foot wooden structure. It's called a Good Neighbors fence, which both sides look exactly the same. It is to be stained with a whitewash finish to match the white color of the house. It is not a hot wire fence, it is actually a custom-made rebar fence, which it has 4-inch spaces in between, almost like a deer fence. It was made raw to rust with time and give it some character to it. So it's not just a fence, you know, there was a lot of thought into it. And the part of having that was to, one of the first things, you know, we discussed is like, she wanted to have a patch of grass, you know. And I told her, well, you know, there won't be any room in the back, but it could be at the front. Well, we do have the grass now, and, you know, I find myself picking up wrappers and things that get blown off. So in order to do that, we decided not to go all the way across the property, just to give it the privacy from the headlights and noise reduction, and then leave the rest of the front of the property open. You know, there are properties around the historic district who have picket fences. They are taller than 48 inches. You know, one was just installed a month ago. You know, at the height of it, it's almost 6 feet. So it all is because of the grade of the lot. But nonetheless, you know, there are, you know, exceptions. And I think that part of Yountville is that you have the mixture of the old and the mixture of the new, imitating the old, because that's why people move to Yountville for, you know, the old town feeling. And we're trying to keep that up, you know, not cheap to achieve it, because, you know, all that requires, you know, a lot of work, a lot of prep, and, you know, material cost. The other part that I think is in one of the variances, the exceptions where it says, you know, that the preservation and enjoyment of the right of property, the same that is possessed by other properties in the same land or use designation. You know, there are a lot of places, I guess, that, you know, like I said, are at the end of the street, but, you know, this one happens to be at the end of the busiest street in Yountville. You know, not just during tourist season, but, you know, everybody uses this as a shortcut from Silverado Trail to 29. You know, the other part is where it says that where it's used, you know, for people's enjoyment, and the little enforcement of the provision of this title would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. You know, I understand, you know, living in the city, living in a town, you know, it comes with, you know, interactions, which is, you know, noise, sounds, and everything else. But this one, we're not blocking the house, we're not blocking, all we want to do is, if you're sitting on the dining room table, you don't get blinded, you know, by lights. And the point of it was, like I said, it's not, you know, to later create a living wall. It's just to give it some sense and some art to the fence itself. You know, the 5 feet, you know, creates a good height for headlights, you know, to get not blocked but diffused by the iron, the wrought iron pieces on top of the fence, and you can still see through. It just diffuses the brightness of the lights, and in a way, it does break out the sound as well.
Okay.
So, and then the height of the post, to address your question, they're varied. Right now, they're between 8 feet 6 inches to 10 feet. And the reason why is because once I have a level for all the posts to line up, then they get trimmed to the size.
Thank you.
Did you have any comments, Laura? Okay. Barbara, did you have any questions of the applicant?
I guess if you have the trellis, the hot wire, we don't call it hot wire because it's custom, but are you going to plant vines on it?
No, actually, the only things that were going to be was kind of be a mirror image of what's inside of what's outside, which is, just field rocks
Okay.
with some lavender and then a couple of tall grasses in between each section. The top part, we're going to put hooks. If there'll be some planters, hanging planters or or a flag or whatever you want to hang on it. But there's no vines growing in it. There's no, we're not planning to sneak that later. So if that was the concern.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Karen? Any questions? Okay. Carrie?
So I noticed that your poles are about a foot or a little over in front of the neighboring picket fence. Is that just because of the difference in your setback, or?
Well, there's the difference in the setback, and if you notice that I follow the line from the apartment building and from the utility post. And then we looked at when the house was purchased, there was a plot plan on the title papers, so we measured it and we came to that. That was where the point was, and we still have, plenty of room in between where the posts are and the edge of the street, which would be, the bike lane. It still give you, a standard sidewalk width.
And so there's an existing fence that comes up the side of the property as you face the house. It comes up the right, and then I think there's a little ear kind of that goes across. Will that disappear? Isn't there a little small bit of the fence? Mm-hmm. Or I thought there was just a little turn where some of the side fence exists. Is that going away, and we'll just see the trellis?
The new fencing or the trellis above?
So when you're looking at your house, a fence comes up the right-hand side, like a low wooden fence.
Yeah.
And then it stops here.
It will just
and your
continue.
pole is here.
It will continue to the pole.
Okay.
To close,
Fill it in.
and to fill it in, and
So
just
the
keep
side
the
fence will come
continuity.
forward and attach to the pole.
Yes.
And then there'll be the new fence from
Yes.
the pole on down.
Right.
Okay. And so the trellis is, the top bar is going to be another 4x4, or?
No, you're gonna be 2x6, and I'm still debating whether to put copper pipe in it to give it more patina to the look, but it's just accents there.
And then you want to hang in the space, you want to have the
No, on the
ability to
post.
hang plants?
No, on the post. If I were to hang it on it, it will start bowing. So
That's
there
fine.
should be, all the hooks are gonna be on the post. And they'll mostly be on the inside part.
All right, and then on the far left, is that another 8-foot post, but there's just no header
Well,
attached
there's-
to it?
There was this ghost gate that, Pinterest, she found on Pinterest, and I
We
didn't-
all love Pinterest.
Oh, I know, some more than others. So the people who build this stuff don't like it as much as the ones that say, I want that. So, happy wife, happy life. The part on the gate was because she saw this gate in Sonoma, and, and like I I said. It was part of making the home.
So-
It's not a structure, it's more of a, just a panel of just old fence boards. They'll be staying the same way as the other ones.
So there will be a gate between those two?
We don't know yet. That's the
Okay.
part that, depends on how this one comes out. And it'll probably be lower with an arch in the center. That for now is just, an open because there is no post on the other side.
Of the driveway?
No,
Okay.
there's no post. And actually, I just planted 2 olive trees on each side of the walkway.
So do you wish to, because the drawing shows a post, do you wish to install another one of your trellis posts there?
It won't be a trellis post, it would be just a gate post, it is, and then it'll be like a 5-foot post, just enough for the height of the gate.
Now with the olive tree, probably not.
But now with the olive trees sitting there, most likely not.
Thank you, I think that's it, thank you.
Karen? Okay. I think you answered most of my questions in the same. Current code restrictions apply to gates as to fences, I would assume. Okay. Okay, if nobody has any more questions of the applicant, we will discuss it.
Unless there's public hearing.
Unless there's a public comment. All right. Sorry about that.
Hi, my name is Elisa Bedolla, and I'm at 6819 Yount Street. And I have a few issues that I wanted to discuss regarding the fence, and I appreciate the input and the descriptions that the resident and the assistant have put in, because it helps clarify some of the questions I had. One of the questions that I did have was regarding what Carrie had said, that the placement of the posts doesn't really align with the other property lines, or where the other fences are placed, and so it looks a little off. It looks well, obviously they're more closer to the street, and it looks like it's not aligned properly, and so my concern is that it perhaps is not in the correct location. So I was wondering if there's a way to request verification of where that actual placement of the fence would correctly be according to the rest of that side of the street.
Is that something that you guys can answer for her? Can you come out to the property line? Can you put it wherever you want?
Well, there's right-of-way between the property line and the street that isn't traveled right-of-way, but is still city right-of-way. And it's generally the location where you see telephone poles and light poles, so that's an indicator out there. But the only way to determine with certainty would be to have a property survey to identify the property corners, and then we could find that property line.
Is that if somebody's any property is installing a front fence, does the town go and make sure that the fence is in the correct place?
We generally follow existing conditions. I wasn't aware in this case it was a foot further out toward the street. So it is something that I think there's definitely merit in verifying that they're on the property and not within the right-of-way. Surveys are of significant cost, so
Yes.
the applicant may wish to pull the fence back to align with the others, or prove property line with a survey.
So that's something that your department will follow up on? Okay.
Thank you. And it is a concern of ours, just because we used to live at 6817 Yount Street, which was all one lot before with 6819. So we used to live adjacent to that property. And when we moved over to the other side of, divided the lot in half and moved over to the other side, we actually had to put the fence right at the same alignment with the previously existing line. The other concern I had was that the fence, to me, appears to be too high at 5 feet, only because the the other fences have, well, one, the requirement that they be lowered to, what, 3 or 4 feet? And that, to me, I've seen some of the fences, they have their 4x4 posts, which are actually higher, and in fact, ours is kind of undulating. So I wouldn't mind if the posts were perhaps 5 feet, but that the areas, parts of the fence between the posts would be perhaps lowered. I don't know if that's feasible for the applicant or not, but it's just a recommendation. I think that the 5 feet is pretty high, and I do appreciate the wanting to have privacy because we used to live right in front of the crossroad, so I completely understand that, but also the resident knew the location of the property when they purchased the property, so I don't think that the rebar is actually going to screen out lighting, but hopefully it will look a little bit more historic than what it seems like. To me, it's a little bit modern. Hopefully that will keep in line with the historic feel of the town, of the old town, because I'm very concerned about that. Let's see if I can just go through my mentioning about the 5 feet, that it had been said that the fence would be consistent with the rest of the old town, but I think it's not consistent exactly with the requirements or guidelines that have been set forth by the town. Let's see. I think that's about it. I just wish the applicant luck, and I do want to wish them welcome to the neighborhood. And I just look forward to seeing the report or the study about where the location of the fence placement would actually be. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming and for letting us know your thoughts. Appreciate it. And there's no other public, so we will move on to our discussion.
I want to make a comment in regard to
Sure.
the
Come
old
back
town
up to
look.
the microphone,
In
please.
regard to the old town look, I mean, if we go farther down on Young Street, towards the park, the corner house, I think is, a pathetic way of representing, the old town look. And I seem to be more concerned in regards to that lot than a 5-foot fence if we really want to get into historic looks, where there's a couch in the front yard and, a bunch of other furniture. So I think there's a lot of other things, more to be concerned in regards of a fence that is not like something somebody has seen before.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, you have some thoughts?
We obviously have to address the neighborhood concern for the overall look on that street. If I remember correctly, there should be about 3 houses. Am I right? To the next corner, to Madison.
Yeah, it's about 3 or 4 houses, is it?
4 houses, yes. So are all the other 3 or 4 houses, 3 houses 3 feet fence, or are they taller? Are they shorter?
Along that block, I only saw 3 feet
Okay.
fences that were 3 feet tall.
Yeah, okay. And they are a foot back from the street.
I'll have to go back and confirm
Yeah.
that based on the
Yeah.
conversation tonight.
Yeah, okay. I hear the concern. I'm just to reaffirm that's the understanding.
And as to the height of those fences, I don't know those 3 specifically, but we do know that throughout Old Town there are legal nonconforming fences, and that it really is not unusual to see a 4-foot tall fence. Since those predate the code, they're permitted to remain in place, but that does sort of inform the look of the Old Town district as a whole.
When you, even in Old Town, when they build new fences, do you bring them to compliance, or you still consider them individual properties?
No, when they're rebuilt, they should be brought into conformance with the code. That doesn't always happen.
Thank you.
There have been occurrences where a taller fence has been installed, and we notice it's installed, and there has been action to say, no, go out, lower the fence. There has been circumstances when that has occurred.
Has there ever been a variance given for this kind of specific incident?
A 5-foot fence?
Yeah.
I can't name one specifically. Nathan has included the variance findings in this, in the staff report. And I think as you go one by one through them, it may be possible to make those findings. This is a uniquely situated property. And I think the fact that, there are other houses at the terminus of a street, this is by far the most heavily traveled one. I would comment, though, that the solid portion of the fence at just 2 feet would really seem to be what mitigates the impact, and that the taller section may be more aesthetic.
Less than parking, yeah.
I do have another question. Since we're talking about new fences, the house on the corner of Pedroni and Jefferson.
Yeah.
On the Pedroni side, they just installed a new fence. I think, am I correct, on the property line with a stone wall, and
Yes.
then the trellis on top? Was that?
They installed a 3-foot stone wall, and then at their side property line on the inside of that wall where they had finished grade, they built a 6-foot fence because it's a side property line. And it was really, a finesse of the interpretation of the code. If it had been built right atop the stone fence, it would have been limited to 6 feet total. But by bringing it in and building from grade, you see it built up 3 feet as the stone, and then a fence behind it, setback.
I see. Okay. So that.
And that's a side yard, so it has a different standard
I see.
and complies with the code.
I see. Okay.
Carrie?
So I did see there was a picket fence next door, a picket fence across the street. I like the fence a lot. I'm trying to figure out if it fits within Old Town. And we just had a big discussion here a few nights ago about massing on property and what things look like. And it's, I'm wondering if there's a way to make some of the fence 4 feet tall and some of it 3 feet tall, or maybe even some of it 5 feet tall, like right in front of your dining room window, because you have that vertical window, and to drop it down so that the massing. And as far as the, I don't know if you could do some sort of undulation with those materials. I'm just opening things up for discussion. But I do think that going to 5 feet, I get what you're trying to do, because I have been a city dweller most of my life on busy streets, so I get that. I'm just trying to figure out a way to make it work with Old Town.
Okay. I understand the reasons you're doing it, but I also understand why the code is at 3 feet and what the effect it would have on town if everybody who didn't want people to see into their front in this tiny town with tiny front yards wanted a 5-foot fence. So I can't find any of these findings to grant a variance, in my opinion, at all. So what do you think?
So may I ask staff another question?
Mm-hmm.
How many, you said there are 4-foot fences throughout Old Town, and that those are legal non-conforming?
Mm-hmm.
And if we were to, and I'm not saying whether I can or can't make variance findings, I'm just asking, if we were to make a variance finding for 4 feet, it would be specific to this property?
That is correct, yes.
Have 4-foot fences been approved, or are they just?
Well, I was going to share an interpretation that we had for the property at Madison and Jefferson. And what you see on that property are The main sections of the fence are 3 feet in height, but they include architectural elements that bring it up in certain locations, and we've had discussion here today that when the fence posts exceed 3 feet, that's in compliance with the code, and we looked at this fence as achieving the same effect, and we approved it at staff level. Also, because the change in grade on that property, it's 3 foot at one end, and we do see it go up slightly. And so there are newer instances of fences that may slightly exceed the 3 feet where there may be justification for it. And then different design motifs or examples that result in a slightly taller fence because it's not the main fence section.
But still, the code intent is to keep them at 3 feet.
It is, yes.
And for a logical reason. I mean, it's throughout the town. That is the goal. We don't want everybody's front yard blocked off. And then this has taller elements, even taller elements added to it, making it higher and higher, so.
Those are considered architectural elements or landscape elements that are really encouraged, though, so I wouldn't tie that to the evaluation of the fence itself.
Okay.
Sorry, could you repeat what are considered architectural?
The trellis.
The trellis.
The trellis, okay.
I mean, oftentimes in Old Town, you'll see a low 3-foot fence, but right over the entry, some type of arbor or trellis structure that it is much taller and has more mass, but it's really nice what it adds to the property for the variety or the different elements it brings.
Does anybody feel strongly and want to make a motion? I would make a motion to, gosh, how is this worded? To accept the project with the conditions of approval as presented, that the fence, including number 3, the fence shall be no higher than 3 feet in height, and include the review of the proper fence line location by town staff. Anybody want to second that? Okay, nobody wanted to second that?
I'll second for the sake of further discussion, so that we can continue discussing. Is that proper? Because once we have a second, then we can continue discussion, or do we have to call the vote?
If you second that, it would then assume a vote would follow.
Okay.
But you can open up for discussion right now if you'd like.
Yeah, so if there's no second, then we can go back to discussion.
So I'm thinking, and I agree, I mean, we have to preserve the character of the town. That's our number one job, is to follow our rules unless we see a variance that should be granted. If the trellis came down and the majority of the fence were 3 feet, and there was one architectural element part of it in front of your window that was 4 feet, that might, I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to think out loud. And you,
So if we were to build, let's say, a 4-foot fence, then drop the trellis to 7 feet.
no, I'm saying do away with the trellis
No trellis.
and
Just
do
have
a
a trellis
3-foot
in front
fence
of the
with
window.
maybe a 4-foot pop-up. And I don't know, that's not a motion, and I'm just discussing.
Oh, okay, that's the gate. Because you can do, like we were like Sandra was mentioning, a 3-foot fence, and then a trellis over a 3-foot gate. And if you place that appropriately to block something specifically.
The gate wouldn't be in front of the window then, though, because the sidewalk's over to the side.
Well, and maybe, may I ask the applicant a question? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe the undulating kind of idea. Would that work for you guys?
Not because of the way the panels are made.
Because of the
rebar.
materials?
Yeah.
Well, if it's going to be custom made, could you make the rebar?
No, the panels are already made.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Somebody else want to try a motion then? Something different?
Well, I will propose for 4 feet fence, since it's not terribly uncommon in town. And provided the town will identify the proper corner where the fence should be in relation to the other property on the same street, on the same block.
Okay, does anybody want to second that? No, okay. Your turn, Karen. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that I see this more as a, let's see my numbers, hold on. A 2, a 3, a 3. I'm seeing it as an 8-foot fence, unless I'm totally losing it. I'm seeing that you're hanging planters along the posts. So you're not blocking the view per se by making it look like an 8-foot fence, but what you wind up planting there, what you add there, could in effect make it look like an 8-foot fence. So in my mind, I'm seeing that as an 8-foot fence, the potential to look like an 8-foot fence. So I think if you actually cut out that bottom section, the board on the bottom, I don't know if you could do or decrease that, just almost like decrease the whole thing down. Does that make sense?
No.
How many feet?
I see it more as even taller than what we're even looking at. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Well,
And that's what I'm talking about, the massing.
They're
of it.
allowed
I guess
to
that's
Look
what,
at
yeah,
it,
that's what,
You see a big structure.
right.
Right.
Which I do think that would probably be very, I mean, I get the point of it, but it's just, it goes against the grain of what you're trying to preserve here in the town. So, so either we ask for a variance or we're saying no, right? Or make your fence 3 feet. Right?
Well, there's make your fence 3 feet. There's make your fence 4 feet, which would be a variance.
4 is a
there's
variance,
make
so
your-
you're still getting a variance.
Yeah,
Right.
make your
The
fence.
findings would still be required.
Right.
Make your fence 3 feet.
So if you're finding a
And-
variance for 4, then,
Right.
yeah, then you're finding a variance in general.
But make your fence 3 feet, and that would meet the code.
Right.
And Sandra is saying that the trellis is allowable as an architectural
so it's
feature.
architectural
So
element,
3
right.
feet with the trellis, 3 feet without the
I think that's
trellis.
fair.
3 feet with the
The
trellis.
trellis, yeah. I think that gives you leeway. It still gives you the leeway to have flexibility with what you do with your trellis from your plants, standpoint, like if, right? I mean, it can give you some room to have more privacy within that window.
So you want to make a motion?
Yeah. I'm just saying.
Well, I think that would be the motion that
That I
Chair
put out,
Cook
yeah.
made.
Right.
Excuse me, because I
I'll
think
second
that's
that.
the staff
We're talking about
recommendation, as we've sort of talked it back around.
So
I'll
you,
second that.
the one that I made.
Yeah.
Well, remake that
You
motion,
make that
just
motion.
for the sake of.
I will make a motion that we accept the project with the conditions of approval as exist, including item number 3, that the fence shall be no taller than 3 feet in height, with the addition of the review of the proper fence location by town staff. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None? So it passes unanimously that we're keeping it to the code of the 3-foot fence. Sorry. Okay. We will move on to the next item. The presentation and discussion of the modifications to the Yountville Code regarding noise control regulations.
Okay. So, on May 17th, so a couple weeks ago, the ZDRB met with the town council to discuss several town policies, including details of the noise ordinance as one of them. At the meeting, the bodies were reminded of really everything that the noise ordinance does, particularly the relationship between the construction or demolition activity and the noise generated from landscaping tools and equipment. Up on the screen, you will see how the code is currently written, that any noise generated from power tools related to construction or demolition activity on a contracted service is limited to 7:30 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Property owners and tenants can make that noise between 7:30 and 8 on Monday through Friday, and 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends and holidays. Now, when it comes to landscaping tools and equipment that generate that noise, such as a lawnmower, leaf blower, weed whacker, contracted service can be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, whereas property owners and tenants can make that noise from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Now, following the discussion, during the discussion, there was talk of noise is noise. There was also discussion of maybe the time could be extended a little bit. Maybe it should be limited even more. And what staff has come up with is a working document. By no means is this the final, and also this is not staff's recommendation either. It's simply one edit that staff made that appeared to be as closely as could be called a consensus as I could come up with, that is there in that last column as a draft standard. From 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday for contracted service, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week for property owners and tenants when it comes to construction or demolition noise. That does not mean all work. It just means the noise generated related to construction and demolition power tools. Same thing with landscaping tools and equipment. Contracted service, 9 to 6, Monday through Friday, and property owners and tenants, 9 to 6, 7 days a week. You have before you, in your packet, the noise ordinance altogether, as well as our report. Now's the time for the board to have further the conversation from last May, from 3 weeks ago, and come up with a recommendation to bring before the town council. If there's any edits to this draft ordinance, staff can make it, then bring it to the town council for review and adoption if it is the board's request. So we're here for any questions you might have.
Good.
So with
Thank
that,
you. Does anybody have
washing
any
my hands of it.
questions of staff?
I had one question. I understand the 7 days a week for the landscaping tools and equipment for the property owners and the tenants. What was the justification behind that for the 7 days a week for property owners and tenants for construction and demolition?
That noise could include something like a table saw.
Oh, the table saw. Okay.
Or any noise like that. If you have a weekend warrior job you want to do at your home, if you're working Monday through Friday, you could do that, yeah. Okay. It's worth remembering that for the bigger projects that require building permits, the town kind of has its own standard that it assigns to each project.
Okay.
And traditionally, that ends up being a 9 to 6.
7 days a week.
Usually not. Usually
Monday
through Friday.
Right.
And no holidays either.
Okay, any specific questions of staff before we have our discussion?
I think I have concern about 7 days a week. Can we give people a break on Sunday?
That's for our discussion.
That's for you to decide.
That would be part of our discussion, yeah.
That would be my...
I was waiting for the end of questions of staff.
To the staff.
Do you have questions of staff? No. Okay. Do we have any public comment? Do you want to comment on that?
Actually, I do.
Okay, come on up.
Very intuitive.
And I wasn't going to comment on this, but the only thing that I see from my standpoint is that in the summertime, 6 o'clock might be kind of early to stop working, especially when it doesn't cool down until after 8 sometimes. But obviously can't work at 9:30 at night, but so perhaps maybe in the summertime extending the PM hour to a little bit later. I know from my own experience, I can't work outside during the day because I get overheated because it gets too hot, especially if I'm working vigorously in the garden. So perhaps for residents, maybe extending that a little bit. And also, kind of a pun intended, but does this apply to cyclists on the weekends? Because it does get awfully noisy. People going through on Yount Street, cyclists actually make a lot of noise. It sounds like a flock of geese going by when they're yelling and talking really loud. But you don't have to answer that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Just in general discussion, can we, I think it's a little confusing reading it and having descriptions of the different, well, I guess it does say power tools. I think it should just in general say power tools or power equipment and not lay out
No specific.
no specifics and just leave it to power, because there's power nailers, you know, when they're roofing, and power things like that. And if I think it would be, I think my goal is to make it clearer for the people in town what the ordinance is, so that people can understand it when it is allowed and when it isn't allowed. And I think the idea of applying it the same to anybody, I mean, yes, differentiating between property owners and contracted service, but all contracted service the same, you know, that just contracted service, not landscapers and construction. Since we're not separating them out, wouldn't it be clear to just make it one title? Contracted services and power equipment, power tools and equipment.
It's up for the board to discuss.
Does that make sense?
I had a very similar thought that when you read the language of B and C, B1 and C1, and the same with B2 and C2, it seems like it possibly, depending on what we think of the timing, but could be combined. But because we, and I guess this is, I do have a question for staff. Are we supposed to be, are you looking to us to look at this noise control regulations as a whole, or only at the hours for specific noises or kinds of noise?
You can look at both. One of the topics that dominated the conversation were the hours, which is why that's what staff's report was focused on. However, the noise ordinance as a whole can be looked at.
Well, there's some questions that you guys put on the back here for us to help us. Does the type of noise matter? Should there be a designation between owner, tenant-generated noise, and contractor-generated noise, and why? So I think there's enough people that have made a good case for contracted services versus contracted services being limited to Monday through Friday, and owner-tenant having some time on the weekend to do projects. I think, to me, that seems to have been answered for me in that discussion and then reading input in the paper. Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
I have a thought on Saturday morning contracted services. I would be in favor of like a 9 to noon Saturday contracted services allowance, simply because people who work, that may be the only time they have somebody to come and do some of these things. Like if you don't do your own lawn, you may want your landscape person to come and be under supervision for some things on that Saturday. So I would be in favor of that. I also understand what our resident said, that if in the summer, and I don't know exactly how we would structure that, but in the summer, whatever months to whatever months, if you went till 7 o'clock or 7:30, I know we had a lot of discussion about that in our joint session, and that was not acceptable to a number of people, but if you work or if you have heat-related issues and you want to do your own work, then I would not have an objection to that.
I agree with that. For the owner-tenant hours, I agree. I even think 9 is too late in general for both. I mean, so the town has contractors that are permitted, can't start until 9 with power equipment. And what was the reason for 9? Just, it's kind of always been there.
Because most of the public work projects, think of things like up at the park, would include heavy vehicles. And those produce extra noise that might be even greater than a leaf blower. And so for that sake, 9 a.m. seemed, that's how the town usually looks at its public work projects. However, staging and them arriving can all occur before 9 a.m. It's just the operation of these noise.
9 just seems so late.
It also comes out of general feedback we've had for larger construction projects, say the Stag's View Lane project, where the contractors were starting between 7 and 8, and really the consensus of people we heard for was they'd rather have it at 9. We realize that may not be a cross-section of the community, but we've heard it enough to sort of establish that as a de facto standard.
Okay.
And I have to respond to Carrie's after 6 p.m. this summer. I think after 6 p.m. this summer for homeowners, there should be if you work in the garden, there shouldn't be a lot of power tool or noise generating equipment. And for the same reason, other people would like to enjoy their summer evening too without listening to the power tools after 6 p.m. So if you can always work in your yard after 6, as long as you don't use chainsaw and power tools, I think that would not be a problem.
Is the lawnmower considered a power tool?
Yes.
It is.
It is. Yeah.
That would be my only concern.
Yeah. But other people would like to enjoy their peace and quiet in the summer too after 6 p.m. before it gets dark. So.
Do you have some opinions? Thoughts?
I think you can still enjoy your evenings with somebody next door. It's not like they're mowing for like hours. These plots of land we have in town are pretty small, you know? It's not like we have these vast lawns that people are mowing all the time.
But I know there are people that
Like-
you mentioned.
like weed whacking?
No, power tools. Like they have a table saw and they're making things till 10 o'clock at night.
We're talking about landscape. I'm talking about the landscape.
Yeah, but we're
component.
putting them all together as noise.
Oh, I was thinking landscaping could be extended in the summer hours.
Just landscape.
And that's what I thought, that if we,
Yeah.
that might be a reason to keep them separate, that maybe landscaping we find okay, but table saws,
Right, because
more to Barbara's point of a hobbyist,
right.
maybe.
I just don't see what the difference is. The noise level is the same and annoying after a certain point.
So that kind of brings me to a question, and that was the reason that I asked, what is it you are charging us with looking at? Because our code starts out with a general noise restriction. And it just says it is unlawful for any person to make any unnecessary, unusual, or intrusive noise which disturbs the peace and quiet of any neighborhood or which causes any discomfort or annoyance to any reasonable person of normal sensitivity. And then we come back and we try to treat separately construction and demolition and landscaping and animal noises. I'm just trying to puzzle through, and maybe it's too much and you don't want us to look at this, how all those pieces fit together. I mean, are we focused on the tree when you want us to be looking at the forest? I mean, as a town, we're back to, like Chair Cook is saying, and Member Allen, whether it's a chainsaw or a leaf blower, do we care?
I think it's correct that it's true that the ordinance tries to cover all sources of noise, and what you've called out is the catch-all, that you cannot create intrusive noise. But when you look at the definition of intrusive noise, it's somewhat subjective, and it depends on the different qualities of the noise. And what we're trying to do with the construction and landscape noise is to create a clear standard that's easy to enforce. And so we know that those are common categories of noise, but since those aren't the only categories, the sort of catch-all is how we regulate noise in general.
And regarding the forest or the tree, right now we probably are asking for more of a tree, because there is the general plan update that's coming soon, and there's a whole noise element to that will be getting really looked at in detail in the coming months. And that's when we're looking at the whole ecosystem. So right now,
Okay.
we
good.
may be more focused on a tree.
Good to know. Well, I just
Okay.
wanted to know kind of where it, so I'm fine to concentrate on the tree. I just
Okay. I hope
wanted to
that
make
was
sure that was
okay.
what we wanted to be doing.
No, I think there's a reason why we're sitting here discussing it. There obviously is an issue for this little town. We all live very close quarters together. And you don't want to set up a standard so people feel abused. At the same time, it's a neighborhood, we all been here a long time. You talk to your neighbors. If you're going to be late coming home, I hope your neighbors, if you're not making a lot of noise, you say, I'll only be 15 minutes. I'm sure people understand. But we're trying to guard against people using a very loose regulation to abuse the neighborhood. I think that's basically what we're talking here. There is an issue, and we need to address it. At the same time, it's a neighborhood we lived in. It's a small town. I don't think we can actually legal every decimal of noise for everybody.
That's a good point. And when the sheriff spoke at our meeting when we met with the town council, he mentioned that like 95% of the complaints are contracted services and not neighbors. Because neighbors are more, okay, well, I know he's finishing up his roof or, doing it himself or making noise, or people are have more recognition of what their neighbor's up to than a contractor there making a ton of noise. So should we go through the questions? I mean, I don't think I don't know that we'll come up with a specific answer
Those
for
were
you
for
tonight either.
talking points to help guide
Do
the
the
conversation.
permitted hours make sense? I think we kind of talked that through, that based on that, guys have had more input than we have as to what contracted hours are good. What's too early, what's too late. I think the hours are good for the contracted service. I hate to make different hours, different days for different groups, because you get back into that same circle where it's not clear. That's just my tendency.
The feedback that staff has gotten, is it mostly from an early start time or a late finish time?
I'd say and Sandra can comment, if it's landscaping, it's usually early start time, and if it's construction, it's a little of both.
They don't work very late.
They don't work late.
Depends on if they're late.
I think it's an early issue.
It's
Mostly early.
Landscape.
mostly
Start
early.
early.
We've had a couple of the late calls for construction.
And if you got a late call for construction and it were, let's say I contracted someone to come and build a garage for me, if you got a late call, that could be handled under the catch-all? If
Go
there were
into more
no
detail with that.
ordinance setting a stop time, if somebody
Saying it's
used-
intrusive noise and it's annoying,
someone
regardless
used a
of the
leaf
time.
blower, or someone were a hobbyist, or someone were a contracted person, that would be handled under the catch-all.
I think
I'm
it's
just trying to
harder
get you-
because it's the sheriff who's enforcing that. A homeowner will call the sheriff will come out, the sheriff really looks to those sections on the permitted hours. I think it
Okay.
makes it harder to tell if the amplitude, duration, frequency, time, occurrence, and tonal quality make it intrusive or not. It's a lot harder to.
So for these two prevalent activities, it's easier if we can come to accommodation on a start and a stop time.
Yes.
So what do you think of the draft that they've put up there? Contracted services Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, and property owners 7 days a week, 9 to 6. Specifically, what do you think of that, Barbara?
I like to have a Sunday off, but I'll go with the majority.
Okay.
Just me.
Fine.
As is. Carrie?
I'd like to add the Saturday morning to the contracted services, 9 to noon. That would be my preference. And, you know, I could go till 7 p.m. for property owners and tenants to be able to let people who get off at 5 come home and have a chance to blow their yard for their party or something.
I don't think it'll really stop people from doing things, but, you know, I mean,
It's not too
Well,
noisy.
construction
They
and
just won't do
demolition
it too
stuff.
much.
They're not in
Yeah,
landscaping.
it's not too noisy.
Um,
You can do it quietly.
We're talking about construction and demolition.
Oh, okay, for construction and demo, then yes, I think 6 p.m. is-
contracted services, yeah.
is appropriate.
But you want to add that Saturday for construction and demolition, 9 to noon?
Oh my
I would like to.
For both areas of noise, right?
Yes.
Oh, for both.
I am good with it the way it is for both. I could see it going till 7 if that became a concern, but not later. 7 p.m. for both. 9 to 7.
All year round,
but
7 o'clock.
I could see that, but
And those comments were just for the contracted services
both.
Well, she's saying.
and for landscaping?
So I'm
Okay.
making little
Contracted services.
John Madden edits here. So the idea is
I would
just
consider it
add
all
everything
contracted
to
and-
7.
Oh, I meant construction,
Oh,
sorry.
And
She's saying 7 for everything.
Okay.
for contracted and for property owners. That's just my my opinion. Oh, look at you.
You've already got
I am John
Madden.
Madden. There you go. You can do that there. Okay.
Have we helped you at all?
We do need some kind of consensus to say that.
Oh, we
the
have to do a motion?
ZD, not necessarily a
So that's in per-
motion.
So we have to-
Make
Oh.
a recommendation with
Okay.
a vote, I
There
think.
we go. And then also considering the Saturday morning thing, we've heard that from one or two of you. I want to hear what the board believes.
Okay, well, two of us, somebody
fine
else
with
said
that.
7. Okay, you're fine with 9 to 7? 9 to 7. You were fine with 9?
On Saturday?
You were fine with 9 to 7, plus you wanted 9 to noon.
9 to noon on Saturday.
For both.
And
Well,
you?
9 to 6.
9 to
I
6.
think summer time, people enjoy their summer evenings. 7 is too late. You almost finish with dinner if you want to sit outside a little bit. But that's just me.
Well, that wasn't very helpful. To you, was it?
Well, the consensus was that you'd
think
be
we're
okay
stuck
with
on-
noise until 7.
She
Four.
She was preferring 6.
Oh,
The rest of us
right,
were
not the
7.
consensus,
Yeah, oh,
but
the-
3 of the
yeah,
4.
Yeah.
Majority.
One was that they would like to see some room for contracted services on Saturday, so the consensus was Monday through Friday for contracted services.
You're saying for Saturday for both construction and demolition? too?
Contracted
Yeah.
services.
For contracted
Contracted
Right, for
services.
both construction and
Yes.
demolition and landscaping tools and
Yes.
equipment. Okay.
But that's only one of 4 that felt
Okay.
that way.
So it should be the flip.
Was that it?
I was thinking it should be the flip. Property owner should be able to do another contracted service.
Do you feel you have enough?
I just want to finish.
Contracted service 7 days a week. I'm saying for people to work and need to have somebody come and do something like replace a door or something on a Saturday.
Right, you're saying they can't.
that
do
would
it.
be-
They could come from 9 to noon.
Power
And
tools,
use their
yeah.
power saw.
Right, right.
Or if they want to do baseboards or.
And if you'd like to be
Whatever.
at
And
home
you want
while
to be
they do it,
present,
yeah.
is what you're saying, yes,
You want to
okay.
be there while
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
doing
makes
it and
sense.
have a day job.
Is there any differentiation between inside or outside? I mean, if a contractor's just coming in and doing your floors
That's what I
inside,
was wondering.
Yes, because it's a noise ordinance, so it's really
Noise.
exterior noise. If
It's
you're doing
really
work
exterior
indoors,
noise.
if you're pounding a hammer indoors and you can't hear it, that's not a violation.
but if they're using
And
a
it is.
table saw inside with all their windows open,
Yeah.
it sort of crosses into the nuisance.
It gets into the
The
weeds.
idea is
a
being
bit.
able to hear noise on an adjoining property. That's what this
Yeah.
is all about.
Yeah.
So, I guess hammering a nail wouldn't necessarily be covered except for really the catch-all, since we addressed
But
power
if it's a
tools.
nail
tools.
gun with
Yeah.
an air
Right.
compressor,
Power tools.
Yeah.
Power tools.
Power tools, power equipment.
Right, like if you have your windows open and you're having carpet installed, they're going to use a nail gun or a tack gun or whatever they use. And at least in my neighborhood, my neighbor is going to hear that.
Mhm.
So is that allowed on Saturday morning or not? I mean, that's
Not with
how
that
it's written
standard.
right now,
how it's written right now, that would not be allowed.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
To include Saturday. It's fine.
You want Saturday?
9 to noon. It makes sense, if you want to be on property when you're having construction and if you have a 9 to 5 job Monday through Friday. It's the only opportunity you would have to do it.
You're talking about property owner and tenant, not the.
No, she's
Contracted
talking-
services.
Not the builder.
Contracted services.
Contracted service.
So the property owner and tenant should be there when that happens on a Saturday morning.
it becomes
If they'd
hard
like
to
to be.
enforce. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
If they want to be there.
She's asking for an opening for contracted services to come in, to be able to come in
And help
on
you with your
Saturdays from
projects.
9 to noon.
If you're getting new carpeting, you can do it on a Saturday. Right?
But that also include construction and demolition?
Yes. Contracted services, somebody that you're paying for.
Now, and when it says construction or demolition, sometimes we think of the major remodels. It could mean I'm putting in carpet. That would fall under the construction and
Construction.
demolition because it's an air compressor with a nail gun or a tack
Contracted services
gun.
with power equipment.
Precisely. Yeah. If there isn't a consensus on this, we can still state to the town council that the board happened to be divided on this issue. Do the five of you want to talk about it? We can easily punt.
They can decide.
Yeah, I think we've got 2 that want it to allow it on Saturday and 2 that don't. So we're stuck there.
All right.
Anything else?
Hey, what happened to the Madden edits?
Oh, there wasn't a consensus, so I removed it.
Oh, when he was drawing up there.
handwriting the
Etch-a-sketch.
They were-
But they're-
You should have
Madden
Etch-a-sketch.
makes all those little X's and O's.
But we are consensus on 7, was it?
There
Or
were
a
2.
3 to 1
Yeah,
on that?
3 to 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that was contracted services only or both?
Both.
Property owner as
All-
well?
all
Okay,
together.
so across the board.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, got it.
I think so.
Shall we move on?
If there's any other items, let us know.
No, I don't think so.
Here we go.
Any
Happy.
staff and board report?
I don't have any.
Okay, then somebody make a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Have a second. All in favor? Motion passed. Thank you very much.